Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Life, the Complete Story. We are on episode 4 this week. As we said last week, we're going over our next phylum in the tree, Cnidaria. As always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Alex.
How's it going, everyone? This week, like Tyler said, getting in Cnidaria. But first, as we always start our episodes off, start with a little what's nature doing in the news this week. We try to do something fairly recent, but it is. There it is. Sorry. So this week we're looking at Indonesia with the Javan tiger, which something they may think it's no longer extinct. It's I believe a subspecies of the tiger that lives, of course, in Indonesia that they had declared extinct, as you can see here by the title of the article. However, they think it may still be around. Tyler, if you want to get a little more in depth into the article.
Right, so this is a pretty short article from NBC News published on March 26th of 2024. Basically, what we're saying here is that we took a hair sample that was found on some fencing in an Indonesian village, kind of did our DNA testing and other things like that to kind of identify if this was a Javan tiger species or if this or individual or if this was some other tiger species. So granted, in Indonesia, there's a few subspecies that live kind of intermingled with the Javan tiger, either being extinct or being very, very rare in the wild.
Yeah. So from the article here, it's saying it would be the Sumatran tiger is the only one that remains in Indonesia, but it is also endangered, as pretty much all tiger species are,
Right.
Subspecies.
So with that being said, they've kind of gone more hardcore into the research and trying to actually figure it out on if they still exist in the wild or if this was just a fluke and someone found this Sumatran tiger hair and is trying to pass it off as a Javan tiger. Yes. But the Javan tiger was declared extinct sometime, unofficially extinct in the 1980s, with an official statement coming out in 2008, I believe, on whether or not it was actually extinct. But yes, that's all I have this week for our Nature in the News. We can toss it over to Alex, and he can kind of give us our overview of the phylum Cnidaria.
Yeah, so starting at the phylum Cnidaria, most people are not going to recognize that, but we talked about it last week. That is getting into a lot of our slightly more complex organisms, and this goes into the found in this phyla are things like jellyfish and corals. I believe, if I remember, yes, corals.
Yes, corals, jellyfish, anemone.
And anemones. Things all that fall in that group, and pretty much all of them, or the vast majority of them, have stinging cells called cnidocytes, which is where they kind of get their name. It's something that so there's in both fresh and saltwater environments, whereas about 11,000 species, so a lot more than the sponges that we talked about.
Yeah, a good 3,000 more species.
At least, yeah. So they're fairly broad. They can be found pretty much all over the world. They have this. Their nervous system is actually decentralized. So they don't have like a brain, and then it goes down from there. It's pretty much throughout the entire body of the
globs
organism.
of nerve cells throughout this jelly-like substance.
Correct, and they're mainly comprised of what is called mesoglia, which is something I did not look up
That
what
is the jelly-like substance.
is that the
That's the
jelly-like substance?
Myxozoa. Yeah, that's the jelly-like
Okay,
substance.
that's something. Yeah, I did not look that up. That is on me. And they have a two layers of epithelial cells. So that outer layer of what would be like their skin, like that membrane, is there's two layers of those cells.
Right,
They
and
can
that's where you
be
find those cnidocytes too in that epithelial.
correct. Yeah, and they can be from big, like you said, the big jellyfish or sea anemones, all the way down to single-celled organisms. That are made up of multiple polyps, so like corals. They're each little teeny tiny organisms that those polyps that make that what is it we know is the coral around them. That's kind of what gives them the color is those polyps and the chemicals they produce. Fossils dating back 580 million years, so before the Cambrian explosion. So they are one of the earliest species that can be
Right, found in
found.
that early ocean along with early sponges.
Correct. And then they actually all only have one opening for both digestion and respiration. So they eat, breathe, defecate all out of the same orifice. So if you think jellyfish, it just has the bell. There's just that opening in the bottom. That's it. And that's how all polyps are. So now we'll start into one of our subphyla here. If we don't want to, I'm not sure if we want to get.
Do you want to go in a little
We'll
bit more
start.
detail?
Yeah, we'll go a little more detail as a overall. So usually you find Cnidarians in two forms, either in your polyps or medusae. So medusae, like on the top right there, are your jellyfish, things like
Right.
that. So that's what I think. That's what that form is. And the polyps are more of like your sea anemone, where they have like a base with tentacles going up. Medusae is a bulb,
Along
usually
with
tentacles
coral
coming down.
too. Coral is a
Coral
polyp.
as well. Yeah, they're a
Um,
polyp.
but most, if not all, Cnidarians exhibit both forms at some point in their life cycle, and it's
Correct.
kind of flip flops. Like jellyfish start as a polyp, as like a little not larval stage, but in that new new form
Yeah.
or new organism stage, and they kind of metamorphose in a way into this medusae form, whereas coral is the opposite. It's starts life in the medusae stage, kind of find its own place to sediment to ingrain in the sediment, and then it
Hmm.
metamorphoses into this polyp. Since the polyps are more sessile, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. Or they have some sort of substrate that that they anchor to, as well. Cnidarians have a strong showing of what is called radial symmetry. So they can pretty much, if you tried to cut it in half, pretty much any way you would cut it, they would have pretty much the same cross section either way you did that, which is a little different than your typical animals. Like of course, animals, the vast majority of them exhibit bilateral symmetry. So if you split them, there's only one way. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's only one way that they kind of mirror, or they're fairly similar from one side to the other. Um,
Right.
but
Like
usually,
if you look at us or like a fish, split it right down the middle, left and right side. These Cnidarians kind of split it like a pizza any way you want.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is something that you like. The phylum we just left, Porifera, kind of exhibits this, but they actually really don't show much symmetry at all. They kind of do their own thing. Um, but yeah, sorry. When talking before, those stinging cells are actually called nematocysts, which they
What did I
have.
call them? Anita for?
Yeah, I think I called them Cnidaria. Yeah, which there's no image of the nematocyst, but it's basically a little. When you think of the tentacles, it's almost similar to that, like a little string-looking structure that's all coiled up inside a little ball, and there's a small piece that's like a trigger cell, and when that triggers, it inverts that uh, nematocyst, which nematocyst like it's a cell, it's a specialized cell, inverts that and shoots that string part, or it's more like a small tube, shoots that out at a very high rate of speed, and that injects venom, and that is what is the stinger per se on things like anemones or jellyfish.
All right.
And these be found on the tentacles of a fair number of Cnidarians. Not all, but a very good number. But yeah, so now we're going to get into our um,
Phylogeny here.
yeah, kind of more of our phylogeny. So you see, there's two kind of groups of
This is a bit outdated.
Cnidarians.
There's
Yes.
three now.
Okay.
We'll
Is
get
this
into it a
like
little bit
this?
later.
Is this like our subphyla?
Yeah, these are our
Okay.
subclasses. So, like, Anthozoa are the organisms and species that spend the majority of their life in that polyp stage.
Okay.
Octocoralia and Hexacoralia, those are some subclasses of coral.
Okay.
And Medusozoa spend a lot of their time in that Medusa stage. We'll go into these a little bit more in detail next week when we talk about corals and Medusas.
Okay. Yeah. So as you can see, both pretty big groups as we move forward. So, like you said, there's actually three subphyla now. So the one we're going to go into this week is the Myxozoa, which I think is the more uh, recent one. Is so I'll let you get into that subphyla.
Right. So the Myxozoa are the newest subphyla to be recognized as Cnidarians. They've kind of been around for a while, but we had them in a in the protozoan section of the tree,
Okay.
and then we kind of moved them into this metazoa when we did more in-depth DNA testing as that technology became more available. So uh,
They
we kind of
realized that they were actually Cnidarians, not
yeah
protists.
we
There's
did
a
some
there's a
testing in
number, yeah.
of the what is R I think it's the R18, so ribosome 18
Hmm.
uh, DNA is pretty similar to what many Cnidarians today have
Okay.
as their in their ribosomal DNA, or gene 18 of the ribosomal DNA or something like that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but
So I know
oh,
these
go ahead.
the king like Protistas said the protist was something that it was kind of a catch-all for the longest time, and as they are able and as genetic testing becomes more widespread, more well used, as well as uh, better, more accurate, more in depth, they realized a lot of the organisms that they kind of stuck there because, like I said, it's that catch-all group where things they didn't really know, especially things that are small, like the Myxozoans, they're very small, kind of single cell, only a handful of cells, that they really didn't know what they were. They kind of just lumped them in there.
Right, they're like just microscopic things. We're like, well, we can't really tell what they are. We're just going off of looks, and they look unique from everything else, so we'll just kind of lump them in there. Um, But yeah, subphylum Myxozoa is the newest recognized phylum. As I said, they were originally believed to be protozoans. Really small species. We're talking the micrometers in size, 10 to 300 micrometers, which is itty bitty. Um, and they are obligate parasites, which means that they cannot survive on their own. They have to be inside of a host at all times. Um, and most of them use a annelid host. Annelids are the segmented worm phylum. We'll get into that
Correct.
at a later date. Um, and after that, they will go in as they develop in the annelid. Then they kind of sprout into their adult form, we'll say, and find a vertebrate host who can supply them more nutrition, whether it be a bird that eats these worms or a fish, and that slowly works its way up the food web into humans,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, usually they stay more in that marine environment, I believe,
Right.
between those worms and then fish. So like I said the size of them, I was looking, that's on the small side, that 30 micrometers is, or sorry, 10 micrometers, that is like down to the size of a human blood cell, or like the diameter of a single hair, like a single human hair, and then going up from there. So on the small side, they become very, very tiny. I mean, some of them said the single cell or only a couple cells. up to like 300, like 200 micrometers is the thickness of a piece of paper. So
Right.
they're not very big at all.
And so the origins of Myxozoa kind of originate back in the Cambrian period. And it's believed to be a kind of a divergence from these free living Cnidarians, and is believed to be a sister group to Medusozoa. So that's why we kind of believe they're these Cnidarians. They also have these nematophores inside of them, these complex stinging organelles. They have more of an organelle, not necessarily a specific cell.
Yeah.
So these organelles are called cnidae, or cnidocysts. And that's all I have really for our Myxozoans. Like I said, they're
Yeah.
newer-ish. We haven't done a lot of research. They're also really small, so doing research is very difficult. And they are obligate parasites. So they like any research we do has to be within a host.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying before that they are parasites. This is where get kind of the two forms of the myxozoans. You get like the two kind of spores, and then you see the annelids, especially marine annelids. Those segmented worms are kind of freaky looking. And then of course the fish, birds, mammals, amphibians, like that intermediate host. That's not where they grow and survive. It's kind of a um, the worms get eaten by that intermediate host, and it goes through that change to those myxospores, where then it is released either through a variety of ways from that intermediate host, and then it becomes an adult in the definitive host. Is where kind of how that cycle works.
Right. I would assume that some type of environmental stimulus happens when it gets eaten by that intermediate host that triggers the life cycle to go into that change into what was it, a myxospore or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yes.
versus the anidophore. But that will conclude our little mini deep dive into Myxozoans.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, I'll let you hop into your most wanted for the week.
Okay, so our most wanted will be a little longer this week because we're talking about the lionfish. So, like any other invasive species, it is not. It is uh, moved from one place to another. So the lionfish is initially native to the Indo-Pacific. So that kind of fits right into our with our news from the week. So that kind of southeastern Pacific, or sorry, that'd be the Western Pacific. So like Southeast Asia.
Southeast
Doing anything
Asia, in the
in
Indian Ocean as well.
correct? Yeah. So they are a. Allow me to pull up what a lionfish looks like. What is a lionfish? So, this is one example of a species of a lionfish. So they look like this. They are invasive in the Atlantic Ocean, as most likely due to the pet trade, people releasing them in the southeastern Ocean, Atlantic, or the U.S. Southeast and Caribbean, so that'd be the Western Atlantic. In those tropical waters, they do a lot of harm to reefs. They eat
Everything.
they eat pretty much everything, and they eat things like parrotfish, which are very vital to reef ecosystems because they eat coral, but what they do is they eat the algae that grows with the coil, and then as they excrete, it actually excretes as sand. So without parrotfish, you don't have quite the amount of sand, especially in reef areas, that you do. And lionfish, as you can see here, they reproduce very quickly. A single female can produce about 2 million eggs a year, and they have no known predators, especially in their invasive ecosystem, which as well, those spines you see on the top actually are like a hard spine that has a venom to it. Now, if a human was to walk in a reef or something and get spined, seen it's been described as like a burning, like a very hot burning sensation, painful, but nothing super dangerous. As something, if you just submerge your hand in like very hot water, it helps break down the protein of the venom that's in the spines. So as you can see, they are that kind of orangey red brown color with those white stripes, a big long fan of their pectoral fins as well as their dorsal fin. A lot of rays coming out of their dorsal fin. They're very pronounced. As you see, yeah, that native range, that Australia, Malaysia, however, um, that yeah, Florida, North California, they've even found juveniles as far north as New York and south to Bermuda. So they could potentially be expanding, which would be incredibly unfortunate because there are cold water reefs that are further up the coast
Right.
into
And part of that's because of the increasing ocean temperatures
correct.
being more suitable for these.
Yes, yeah, and so as you can see, they're nocturnal hunters. They're not very quick, as you can see. They're kind of big and wide. And they're not real sneaky, but that's why they have those big, sharp spines with the venom in them to discourage predation. Um, and they kind of push their prey into a corner. It says here they fan out their pectoral fins, kind of make themselves real big, and get things into a corner, and then ambush them until they're able to capture their prey. Of course, they're not threatened or they're an invasive species, so they're not threatened or endangered in any way. Um, as well as um, the reason, especially why they made it to the U.S., is because they were used a lot in the aquarium trade. Very very popular. They are a food in their native range. A lot of those countries in that area are prone to the use of what would be considered like uh, I wouldn't call it like traditional medicine,
Yeah,
traditional food
Eastern
sort of
medicine,
things.
traditional
Yes,
medicine,
yeah,
those type of hot words.
yes, yeah. But as you can see here, that venom from their spines, it's kind of a neurotoxin, neuromuscular, so it causes some pain and some cramping, but nothing too dangerous. Of course, if anything else, get medical attention, especially if someone has a reaction to it. That's with any sort of thing as we go through
Does it just block
our
acetylcholine receptors?
yeah, yeah, it looks like it.
That's what most neurotoxins do
Correct. Yeah,
in the
which
natural world.
causes that kind of spasming, crampy sort of
Yeah,
pain. I mean, if someone is allergic to it, it could to the point where you start having trouble breathing, paralysis, things like that. So,
and I'm sure that
um,
depends on where you get
correct,
affected as well.
correct. But just an example of why this thing isn't so invasive. Kind of why it eats a lot of crustaceans and small fish, which are very important in reef ecosystems. So that is why it's something to look out for, as well as it competes with native fish, especially things similar in size like snapper and small grouper that live in reef environments. Yeah, so that's
And
all I have.
it seems like they're not so like yeah they target the Atlantic. That's their invasive areas, the Atlantic, but it's not just along the U.S. coast.
No,
They've been spotted in the Mediterranean and along the European side and African side of the Atlantic as well. But there's kind of in a different article we had. So Alex showed off the NOAA article, right?
yeah, yeah, the National Ocean Service Administration or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So the
Right.
National Ocean Service, it's a U.S. based service, but yeah. So
So
your
the
other
USDA,
yeah
the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they have their own article, and they kind of highlight some spotlights of what we're doing to kind of mitigate the lionfish population in the
yeah
U.S. as well as worldwide. Um, so we've had some lionfish like fishing tournaments
Yeah, and
Um,
I know a lot of people they'll like reef dive or snorkel and
yeah,
spearfish them because you obviously don't want to grab them, but they're not real quick, so it's not too difficult to spearfish them.
and we don't live down where they're more prevalent, but I
Correct.
assume that there's charter boats that make some type of money um, off of these lionfish and hosting like a charter uh, takedown, maybe per se.
Like the similar to like in the American Southeast where there are things like the Burmese python, which is something we'll get into at some point. It's another invasive species where there's almost like a bounty for them,
Right.
where if you catch them and kind of show that you can get money for them, that could be something they do with the lionfish, where they provide a bounty. If you catch, you produce it to like a certified um, agent, something, or someone who like works with um, that government agency that would be in charge of that. You could get some sort of money for that,
Yeah,
because you're removing an invasive species.
it looks like honestly that's something they're doing. This lionfish invitational that Noah is putting on
Hmm.
um, at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary in
Yes.
Florida, I believe. But it's a couple dive teams who are doing research as well as removing lionfish. So they're getting size data, quantity, if it's just the one species of lionfish or if it's multiple, because there's multiple. There's probably close to a dozen species of lionfish.
Yes, there are 12 recognized species of lionfish, um, all relatively similar as far as they look. Big major differences like size and how they're shaped, as well as colorations. Like there's some that are much more white or have more red or brown. They're found in different areas as well.
Right. Anything else to add about lionfish and its issues in?
I was just going to go into that lionfish invitational you're talking about a little more. It looks like it is a kind of a science-based sort of expedition. They have, it says here, 11 dive teams that work to remove as many lionfish as possible. So each team is 8 divers. So it's kind of a dual edge of they conduct surveys to see what is in the area in that Flower Garden Banks Marine Sanctuary, which is in that southeast off the southeastern coast of the United States. Um, so they do kind of a survey of what's there, like species, how many, how big, as well as catching as many lionfish as possible just to remove that invasive
Okay,
species.
so it's a
And
native species survey plus the invasive species removal.
correct. Yeah, actually, here it says spearfishing. Okay, this is in their sanctuary is illegal. There are um, special permits issued for spearfishing in that sanctuary because pole spears are most effective at catching lionfish. And they look like big tubes that they catch the lionfish in. Kind of I'm sure is to research them. But yeah, it looks like they have some big buckets. Yeah, and of course they check the lionfish sizes and just so they can have an idea of like how the lionfish are doing. I'll share a picture here of this fish that was caught. This is the largest lionfish I think they caught during the last invitational, which is
What?
about 17 inches. So that's a very big lionfish, and they said the
That's
smallest was
large.
1 inch, so that'd be like a baby pretty much. But they had a grand total of 317 lionfish when they did that day, or those couple of days. So there's some here are the tubes I was talking about. They catch them in these
Oh, it's
tubes.
basically a fish trap. Yes.
Yes, pretty much, and then they dump them out into these
What
buckets as they
do they
measure them.
spear them and then like use that?
I'm not sure. I would guess so. That's probably why they have like the one-way valve here, so they just shove them in after they catch them, and just to keep them from
Oh yeah, it says on the caption there, it allows the diver to push spear.
Yes, and then remove it for remove
Oh
just the
yeah,
spear.
because yeah, I get you now.
Prevent
The
them from
valve
being
kind of
spined.
just lets
Yeah.
the interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so now our last segment here, Tyler, we're going to take away with our amazing species of the week. This is a species that is found on the IUCN Red List. So it's a danger, at least endangered, or threatened or endangered. This week, of course, falling into the classification of Cnidaria that we started, you have for us the staghorn coral, which is Acropora cervicornis. Is the
Correct.
scientific name.
So we kind of went hand in hand for once in our invasive species and
Yes.
our amazing species. The staghorn coral is found in the Western Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea area, Gulf of Mexico, along the coast of Mexico, all the way down to Venezuela, and in and around all those Caribbean islands. Uh, so they kind of inhabit that marine lyric zone we talked about last week, 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
when I covered that one sponge species.
Yeah.
Um, that's about what 5 to 10 meters, I said,
I think
roughly.
here it says 1 to 60 is where it said on the IUCN page as far as their depth limit. So yeah, that's still that lighted zone.
Yeah, where light can still penetrate, they can get nutrients.
Correct.
Um, right. They are listed as critically endangered, which means
Pretty.
population has declined 80%. I went over this
Yeah.
last week and I forgot what I said.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a very extreme
Right.
population loss.
We have some conservation efforts in place. Restoration of the species, mostly by asexual propagation, is an ongoing and growing effort across much of the species range. Whether mortality continues to exceed growth and recruitment or not, the species requires intermediate investigation and monitoring. So that kind of means that we have to intervene as humans in order for this to be a successful rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Um, and that asexual propagation, a lot of coils we use like cutting techniques to
Yeah. Budding.
budding and
Yeah.
things like that
Well,
to
that's how
grow.
they reproduce. Yeah, they do. They take coral samples and try to grow those in simulated reef environments.
Right. This was assessed in 2008 as critically endangered, with its most recent assessment being in 2021 on June 1, with its publication in 2022. It was assessed by the IUCN SSC Coil Specialist Group with a list of assessors and reviewers. Yeah, no one really that speaks volumes, but I'm sure they're big in the name of coil.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
these are experts in the
Yes.
field of marine corals.
As I said, they inhabit the majority of the Caribbean islands. I'm not going to go into its every single island. I will share my screen though, so you as viewers can see
Most
um,
of them.
most, if not all of them. This long list here is all the islands that it inhabits. Like we said, that 1 to 60 meters deep, the Nordic zone where light is able to penetrate down. 60 meters is probably that bottom of the barrel where that light reaches, as we said, decreasing population. And it's not fragmented, as you can see up in this map here. It's one pretty continuous line from its most westward range all the way to its most eastward range. It's long
Yeah.
connected.
And then north and south as well.
Right. And as the yellow range is its extant range, resident range, so it's not exactly introduced anywhere else, nor is it believed to be extinct in any of these areas yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Here it says the problem too, especially with a lot of with corals specifically. We'll talk about that next week as we dive deeper into corals. But they have very long generations. Usually takes polyps a fairly long time to reach maturity. It says here,
right.
um,
This
Yeah,
species, I said
maturity.
it says a 10-year generation length, which I don't
Yeah,
know if that's not how long the polyp is alive for
correct.
per se, but that's how long it takes before
It could produce
it
the
can
next generation.
reproduce.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's somewhere between 3 and 8 up to 10. Yeah, so they say that based on average sizes and growth rates, it said average generation length is about 10. So it could be longer. It could be even. I think it said. Um, sorry, that was it. Estimated the population decline rates over a period of 30 years. So
Yes. So they're found in those shallow tropical reef ecosystems, and they prefer kind of that upper level of the reef, all the way down to like a middle ground. They don't like to be at the bottom of the reef system. They like to be on top of it more,
mhm,
and they don't like waves. They prefer that lower wave exposure. So if they can
yeah,
find a spot that is pretty calm, they prefer that. Um, right, and they have coral reef and rocky areas as their main habitats. Lots
yeah,
of threats to them. They are a coral species. Coral can't move, so it's basically at the hand of everything else that goes on around it, whether that be tourism, fishing, over harvesting, invasive species such as the lionfish we discussed 10 minutes prior,
hmm
um, or diseases that are introduced through maybe new corals that might make their way into the area based off of pet trade or things like that. Changing temperatures, global warming, global cooling, those type of things.
yeah.
Recreational activities. I don't quite understand what they mean by that.
Uh,
I'm assuming
yeah,
that's something along.
boating and fishing are two. Especially fishing is a fairly big one.
Right,
Diving and people that take pieces of coral, even though you're not allowed to, because
right.
they are endangered. So it is very illegal.
Yes. Shipping
But
lanes,
people still do it.
Caribbean Sea, lots of ports, cruises
Yes.
coming through. I'm sure they don't do any type of favor for coral reefs.
No,
Uh,
and then we said with climate change, as the oceans get warmer, they acidify, you can see a lot of coral bleaching as well.
right, exactly. I was about to get into that too. As these oceans warm, they're able to absorb more CO2 from the atmosphere and act as a carbon sink. Correct?
Correct.
You're
Yes.
you're the chemistry guy.
Yes, correct. So it takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, combines it with uh, water like H2O, and creates carbonic acid and different variations, hydrogen carbonate, or sorry, maybe bicarbonate, carbonate, um, carbonic acid. Those are the different levels of that um,
Which kind of eat
chemical.
away
Yes,
at the calcium.
correct, because the carbonate and bicarbonate ions have a much higher tendency to bond with calcium in the water than they do with hydrogen, and so that is what kind of eats away at uh, the calcium carbonate as well. It's a um, like a balance. I'm trying to remember the technical term
Like a
for it.
redox reaction?
Not a redox reaction, but it is um, it's a constant sliding scale of the different
Oh, like an
ions.
equilibrium.
Yes, equilibrium. Thank you. And so as it puts more uh, carbonate into the water, it produces more. Um, it causes more of the carbonate that is in the um, corals as well to be broken down or released to balance, as it puts more of the carbonic acid and bicarbonate into the water. It has to balance out. So that's part of what's causing the breakdown as well. Like I said, that carbonic acid is acidic and calcium carbonate is not. That is, and calcium like bicarbonate is what is like your antacid
Right.
in.
Like your
So
Toms
yes,
and
yeah,
stuff like that. Um, Other threats, pollution, global threat to basically everything.
yeah,
Um,
especially aquatic species.
Especially aquatic species because water just sucks up any type of toxin.
Correct.
And this could be anything from fertilizers used on these islands to any type of effluent in the industry to human waste, human trash, things like that.
Everything in between.
And this is one of the most popular species for the aquarium trade. Uh, gives it. I haven't shown you guys a picture yet. So
Yeah.
looks like this. These kind of like sharp looking
Especially the yellow
yellow, the very
ones.
vibrant yellow ones. But actually, these purple and pink ones are staghorn coral as well.
Yeah, they just may not be this specific species. The yellow ones are the specific species, I believe.
Correct. Uh, but yeah, very colorful, very distinctive shape. Um, Makes them very popular in the aquarium trade. And it says that we seized 10 times more coral in 2012. So we're talking 12
Over.
years ago
Yeah,
than we did in 2003. And I'm sure that number has just increased since then.
I'm sure.
And the amount of legal imports doubled from 2003 to 2009. And I don't know if we've halted those type of imports or at least cut back on them because of this being such a critically endangered species.
Yeah.
But I assume some type of uh, embargo or of sorts was put in place.
Yeah, so, some sort of restriction because it is a critically endangered species.
And with that being said, it has lots of conservation actions in place. We have a recovery plan. A lot of that is through this artificial asexual budding and stemming.
Kind of more or less trying to farm the coral. Farming is
Right.
not the right word, but trying to raise coral in a controlled environment, like an aquarium environment, to be able to reintroduce it.
Right. Because these are simple enough organisms that we are not going to leave any type of imprint on them by raising them in captivity. They have in place species management, so they're being monitored and controlled by local governments, national governments, this, that, and above, um, throughout the range, as well as sanctuaries and other type of protection areas, and education. It is listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act from the U.S., vulnerable from in the Venezuelan legislation, and in Mexico, it is under special protection under their endangered species. So a lot of countries have protection laws in place to preserve the species, and they are present in many marine sanctuaries, Florida Keys, Block Island Reef, other sanctuaries in Belize and the Bahamas, and we have lots of uh, areas trying to propagate these species in the U.S., Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican, Jamaica, and Honduras. And we are trying to going as far as salvaging things that may have been uprooted during natural disasters like hurricanes to kind of get them back into a stable reef structure by regrounding them. And we're talking by 2012, we've had, oh, I just saw the number, 60 programs developing some type of program to help bring back this Acropora genus. Anything to add?
No, it's something, and they're doing this with a lot of different coral species because of how strongly they've been affected across uh, the whole their whole range, as well as, like I said, all those different species are all pretty much affected by the same things, and they're trying to restore them. But things like the staghorn that are pretty important, pretty notable coral species, they are one of the more threatened
Right.
ones.
And coral is such a vital keystone to these marine ecosystems,
Yes,
especially in these
yeah,
reef habitats.
Yeah, they're actually almost more important than the rainforest because of what they do for the global ecosystem.
Right. The rainforests and the coral reefs have the highest concentrations of biodiversity in the world,
Correct.
and it is very imperative that we do our part in protecting them.
Correct. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, but I have nothing else for today, so we'll leave off with a beautiful picture of the staghorn coral. I appreciate you spending time with me this evening. We've got a good start into Cnidaria. Next week we will get
We'll cover the larger subclasses, the the corals and the jellyfish,
yes,
medusas.
yeah,
Yes,
Medusazoa and I forget the other
starts with an A.
group, Anthozoa.
Yes, anthozoa.
Anthozoa, yes.
Yes. But once again, as always, if you have any questions for us, any articles, any highlights, anything you want us to cover in this show, feel free to send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com. One of us will get back to you.
Yeah, it may make its way into an episode. We would love to discuss, answer questions, discuss things more in depth. That's how you learn.
And don't forget if you follow us on Spotify if you have not already, as well as give us hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Um, Eventually, we plan on doing some more out of podcast features. Maybe I don't know, maybe a zoo vlog in the future, aquarium vlog. Uh, we'll figure out when we get there.
Yeah.
Um, but thank you as always for joining us this week. Keep learning.
Yes, sir. Yep. Learn something new every day.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you,
And with that,
everybody. You have a good week.
we will join you next week.